you mentioned kind of the ups and downs of life and the midlife crisis. And right now you said focusing kind of on the journey,
Mm-hmm.
but what the journey involves is ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
Is there advice or any kind of thoughts that you can elucidate about the downs in your life,
Yeah.
the hard parts of your life, and how you got out, or maybe not? Or is there, yeah, how do you see the dark parts
Yeah.
of life?
So I'm so glad you're asking this question because it's something that our society does a terrible job at preparing us for. Every Hollywood movie has to have a happy ending. It is ridiculous. You can count on your 10 fingers the number of bad ending movies that you've ever watched. And you probably wouldn't need all 10 fingers.
Yeah.
We strive to tell everyone, yes, you can succeed. Yes, you're a millionaire, just temporarily disabled. And yes, the prince will eventually figure out his princess and they will have a happily ever after ending. And yes, the hero will be beaten and beaten and beaten, but you know that at the end of the movie, the good guys will win. We need more movies where the bad guys win. We need more movies where just everybody dies. where just, MacGyver doesn't figure out how to disable the bomb and it just explodes. you just need more movies that are more realistic about the fact that life kind of sucks sometimes and it's okay. So again, growing up in Greece, I have been exposed to songs that are not just sad, but they're miserable. Miserable. So one of them comes to mind. And it's basically talking about this woman who's lamenting in the early morning about losing the joyful kid, the joyful young man who basically died in the Civil War in the arms of our own fellow citizens. And she's like, if only he had died fighting the foreign forces, if only he had died at the, sides of the, general, if only he had died with honor,
Yeah.
I would be proud to have lost the joyful kid. I mean, it's devastating, right? It's like he didn't just die, he died without honor.
Yeah.
And my friend who was with me was listening to the song and she's like, this is depressing. I'm like, whoa, you have to listen to another one. It's not as sad. And she's like, what? This one died with honor? So that's one example.
It's a kind of a celebration of misery.
No. So let me give you a couple more examples and then I'll answer that question. So another example is I picked up this book that I had from my childhood and I started reading stories to my kids. And the first story is about these two children. One is really poor living on the street and the other one is really rich, really living in the house on the bright light above. And the poor one is wishing, looking at that window and wishing that he could have that house. And the other one is at the window wishing that he was free, that he wasn't sick all the time, that he could escape outside. It's only 4 pages long. And at the end, both children die. One of them dies from cold. The other one dies from illness. And you're like, how is that even a children's story? The next story, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's skip this one. So I read this to my kids and then I read the next one. And the next one is about this woman whose brother is at war against the Turks. And he is going to die. And she prays to the Virgin, please don't let him die. And the Virgin appears and she's like, no problem. Tell me who to kill instead. And she's like, anyone. No. Choose one. How about this Turk? This one has 2 kids, a beautiful family waiting for him at home. She's like, no, not this one. Choose another one. And then she goes through all the life stories of the others. And she's like, no, just don't take anyone. She's like, I can't do that. You can choose to bring your brother back. And he will be depressed for the rest of his life because he didn't fight at war, because he didn't go to that battle. And he will live without honor. She's like, and in the end, the woman decides to have her brother killed instead because he dies without. I mean, this is insane. So yeah. Why am I giving you these examples? It's not a glorification of misery. It's expanding your emotional range. It's teaching you that, and when I read these stories, I'm not a jerk. I'm crying out loud. I have tears, and I like my face becomes red from the pain that I'm experiencing through these stories. It's just so deeply touching to embrace the suffering, not because of an accident, but because of a choice. The sacrifice to embrace the fact that not everything is cute and rosy and always ending well. And I think that we don't do a good enough job of teaching our kids that just life sucks and life is unfair sometimes. And that's okay. And sometimes I read a story to my kids. I read a story every night. And sometimes the story is horrible. And sometimes the story is good and sort of friendly and happy. And my kids always ask, what's the moral of the story? And sometimes there's a moral. And it's like, oh, you should be good, or you should be nice, you should be helping each other, etc. And sometimes there's just no moral. And I tell my kids, you know what? Sometimes just life doesn't make sense, and it's okay. And you can't comprehend everything. And I think this concept of how do you deal with the bad days comes from the fact that we're brainwashed into thinking that every day should be a happy day. And we're not ready to cope with misery. And the other thing that crying through these stories teaches you is that you don't have it nearly half as bad as you think. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Basically, it tells you that, I mean, my mom would always tell me about how she was transformed as a teenager when she volunteered in the hospital and she saw all these people at the brink of death, clinging for life and helping them out to best she could and crying her heart out when they were dying. And just sort of how that taught her the appreciation for what we have every day. Waking up every morning and saying, my life doesn't suck. My life is not nearly half as bad as it could be. And sort of embracing the joy that we have of living where we live in the moment we live. And I'm going to go further. If you look at the arc of human life, human existence through the centuries, there's no better way to be alive than now. I mean, we're complaining about every single little thing, but life expectancy is at an all-time high. Sickness, all-time low. Poorness, misery, all-time low. There's no better time to be alive, globally, across all of human existence. Number one. Number two, here in Boston, there's no better place to be alive. If you think about the amalgamation of science, engineering, technology, the ridiculously awesome people you're bringing every week to your podcast, I mean, this is the ancient Greece of modern society.
But the weather still sucks. Because
no, let me put it this way. The weather gives us a range of emotion. The full range.
the full
of
scenic
human weather
range.
patterns.
That's such a fascinating thing about human psychology. I often reread this book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, his living through the Holocaust and the concentration camps. And even there, where there's like human misery is at its highest, even there, he discovers these moments by observing the suffering, by accepting the suffering. He observes moments of true joy of how great his life is relative to others at the camp who have it worse.
Yeah. So it's a dangerous slippery slope to think that way, because it's basically being better than the Joneses. And if the house next door has a giant car, then you want to get a bigger car or something like that. It's not comparative misery. I think the way that I see it is slightly different. It's not even thinking about all the worst possible outcomes that could have happened but didn't. The example, as you were talking about the concentration camps, the most horrible, one of the most horrible moments of human existence, I was thinking about pictures that I was seeing of kids in Syria, in war-torn zones. And you're looking at these kids, and again, I cried out loud, imagining my own son in the van after a bomb explosion, watching his, father die, or his siblings die, or losing his friends. It's something that we are not capable of fathoming. But if you actually put a 7-year-old in that situation, the look that I saw in these kids' eyes basically said, it is what it is. It was, and I've experienced that with my own kid when he gets, like, my 3-year-old 2 years ago, who's now my 5-year-old, she was burned really badly with like hot chocolate and coffee that just peeled off her skin. So you could actually see just her fragile skin had just peeled off. And she was the happiest little kid. She was just going along with the punches.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
She accepted it.
So
Oh,
it's kind of
profound.
dramatic to sort of realize that children don't say, "Oh, I could have it better." They sort of embrace the moment, not embrace, but sort of accept the moment, and then they can have moments of pure joy in a horrendous war-torn country. And, like so many people from, these war-torn countries basically say, oh, you think you Americans are going to just come and just send us a bunch of aid and food, etc.? Yeah, sure, that's helpful. But what do we dream of? What do we struggle for? We struggle for love. We struggle for meaning. We struggle for, emotions and friendships. We struggle for the same things you guys struggle for. We're not just like every day waking up and saying, oh, I wish I had more food. No, that's just a given. I just don't have enough food. But what we struggle with are basically everything else. And that sort of gives you some perspective on life. It basically says, and another story that my mom told me when I was a kid is this story about sort of this man who's basically, he sees the Christ appear in front of him, and he says, oh, Christ, I'm carrying all these problems. I'm carrying this big bag. Can you please take it from me? And he's like, sure. Let me just give you any other bag. And basically, and of course, the person in the end accepts his own bag.
So acceptance, ultimately,
basically,
the path you recommend is acceptance.
Every single other bag is probably worse. It's the evil you don't know versus the evil you know. Like, we all struggle with our own problems. But if you look at the bigger picture, it's just your path through life. And if you embrace it, the good and the bad, every single day, it's just joy, elation, sadness, misery. If you don't have both, you're not a complete human being. You can't, the last example I'm going to give is the movie Inside Out by Pixar. Beautiful movie.
Which one is that?
The one with the little characters controlling
the
Riley's
emotions.
brain.
Oh, it's a great movie. Yeah.
So you basically have joy and sadness and fear and disgust, etc. And the moral of the story, if you remember the movie, the moral of the story is that in the end, Joy is basically trying to fix everything, to make everything happy. And she's failing miserably, and everything else is like crumbling and falling apart. And the little girl basically becomes emotionless because all she knows how to do is fake happiness. And I think it's a very good analogy for our everyday society, where we're always saying, are you happy? Are you happy? My mom calls me and she's like, Manolis, are you happy? I'm like, Mom, stop asking this stupid question. No, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
What you should be asking is if I'm fulfilled.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing. I don't go around being happy.
I would love it if your mom called and said, Manolis, are you suffering beautifully? Or something like that.
That's exactly right. That's what she should be asking. Are you struggling to achieve something great?
Yeah.
That's the question that mom should be asking. Not
Hear
are you
that,
happy?
Mom? Call me about the suffering, not about how good are you doing.
So what I tell her is that life is not about maximizing happiness. Life is about accomplishing something meaningful. And accomplishing that meaningful thing cannot come from a series of joyful moments. Yeah. It comes from a series of struggles, of successes and failures, of people being nasty to you and people being nice to you, and embracing the full thing.